This is the last week of our Lenten series that has gone along with the Lenten devotional that we are reading as a church family. And by now, if you're a part of the church family, you know that what we've tried to do on Sunday mornings is draw our attention to simple actions that are suggested in the pauses of the devotional. So here are the first 5 weeks of the series. Hopefully some of these ring a bell for you. Better yet, I hope that you have found some of these to be life-giving, even life-changing, as you've tried to put them into practice day to day, week to week, this Lenten season. Today, let's start here. If I were to ask you to bring to mind one of the most vivid memories of your childhood or adolescence, I wonder what kinds of memories you would recall. Well, odds are you're going to bring to mind stories or episodes that are highly charged emotionally. Because emotion, good or bad, makes us remember. Or you might bring to mind a memory that for you defines who you are as an adult. Something that happened to you as a child or a teen, and you have lived your life ever since in the wake of that event. But here's another kind of memory that you might find comes easily to mind. Something that surprised you. Something that defied your expectations. Something that astounded you and astonished you. And the reason you find those things easy to remember when so much else in your past is not, is simply because of how your brain functions. When you're surprised, when you are put on your back foot and your expectations are surpassed, your brain dumps a whole bunch of norepinephrine into your system, and it heightens your awareness, it makes you focused, it makes you alert. That's why you remember surprises. Moreover, if I asked you to recall a surprising memory from your childhood or teenage years, one of the things you would notice is that you're going to recall a lot of details, seemingly obscure, commonplace details about that episode. Because surprises are sticky like glue. You remember not just the surprise, but so much else that was going on or observable when the surprise happened. So, for example, where were you on the afternoon of March 30th, 1981? I was in the Pass Music Store in Banning, California, as a wee 6th grader, getting ready for my guitar lesson, which I'm sad to say didn't take. I have never been a great guitar player. And as I'm waiting for my teacher, I remember what I was doing. I was thumbing through the racks of LPs. Yes, this is before LPs came back and were cool. This is the first time around. I'm thumbing through, looking at all the awesome album art. Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne, Molly Hatchet, The Police. All bands, by the way, not allowed in my fundamentalist Christian home. And what I remember about that day was what was said on the radio. Somebody tried to kill the president. someone attempted to assassinate President Reagan. And I could go on and on with details of what I remember about that day, including how hot it was in the music store because their air conditioning was broken. And that's because of how surprise works in your brain. Have you ever noticed, one more thing about surprise, have you ever noticed that it is very hard to get people, even yourself, to change your deeply held beliefs or perspectives? Sure you have. And you've probably noticed that spouting facts or data at people don't really work to do that. If anything, it has the boomerang effect of making them dig their heels in more. You know what does change somebody's deeply held beliefs? Oh, you guessed it, surprise. When they have an experience or they encounter something that is so far in left field for them that they are forced to question what they thought, what they believed, their orientation, their perspective. So you could say that surprise is one of humanity's greatest teachers. Let's go back to the events described in that passage I read for you from the opening of John chapter 13. What undoubtedly describes one of the most shocking, stupefying events of Holy Week. It occurs on what we now call Maundy Thursday. It is something that Trevor Hudson in the devotional brings to mind for us in the entry from this past Monday. That's why I chose it. We now call it the foot washing of Jesus and the disciples. Let's go back into that scene that the scripture painted, and I want you to notice a few things. First, recall that the writer of the Gospel of John wants us to slow down and pay attention. We know that because of all the details that the writer mentions. The writer does not say, and oh, by the way, Jesus stood up during the meal and washed his disciples' feet. No, the writer lingers and says, Jesus got up from supper, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. You can see it in your mind's eye. Now, washing feet in the Jewish and Greco-Roman world of Jesus' day was a common courtesy. Most people walked around in sandals. Most of the roads were dirt, which meant when it was wet, they were mud. So when you showed up at someone's home, they would provide you with a basin and a towel to wipe off your feet. If it was a home that had a servant or a slave, then the servant or the slave would do it. And what is so stunning about this story is who does the foot washing. As one writer says, what happens here to his disciples would seem as if it's entirely backward. It is an affront to their established order. It is a disruption of what they thought the normal power dynamics should be. But that's not all. So not only is it surprising that Jesus, their rabbi, their Lord, their teacher, washes their feet, he does it during supper. That seems rather unhygienic, don't you think? What should have happened is when the disciples all showed up for the meal, it should have happened first. And yet, as to grab their attention, Jesus waits. And sometime during that Passover meal, he stands and then moves around the room washing their feet. And oh, by the way, this took a while. We know from all 4 gospel accounts, there are more than just the 12 disciples in the room. there could be upwards of 30 or 40 or 50 people, men, women, and children, gathered in that upper room. And we are told that Jesus went one by one by one, washing their feet. No words by Jesus were uttered, but I'm sure you could hear the nervous tittering between the disciples around the table. What on earth is Jesus doing? Why on earth is Jesus doing it? This is not, though, the only two surprises of that evening. Do recall that every one of the feet that Jesus washed would abandon him in less than 24 hours. And nonetheless, Jesus moves around the table, one by one by one, washing their feet. Jan Richardson is a United Methodist pastor who is famous for her painted prayer book. She writes about the foot washing on Maundy Thursday, quote, "As Jesus worked to convey what he most wanted his companions to know on that fateful night, he does not start with spoken words. Instead, he takes a towel, a basin, and water. Perhaps more than anything Jesus could have said that evening, this washing speaks loudest of all. It is the vocabulary of action, and it is the thing that his disciples would never forget." End quote. So what is this surprising act on Maundy Thursday supposed to impart to Jesus' disciples, both then and now? Well, it has to do with how we relate to both Christ and each other. And the commonality between those two things is that it has to do with serving and being served. So first, what does the foot washing tell us about how Christ wants us to relate to him as his disciples, as he is our Lord? Listen to these two verses from the passage again, and I'll call your attention to a very important word in them. So this is when Jesus makes it around to Peter at the table and wants to wash Peter's feet. Peter said to Jesus, "You will never wash my feet." And Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you will have no share with me." So Simon Peter replied to him, "Lord, not only my feet, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said, if I don't wash you, if I don't serve you, you will have no share with me. That's a versatile ancient Greek word. It means that in some cases, you will not be found in the same region or district as me, the same zip code as me, if you will. It also can mean you will have no part of me, not a single piece of me. As if somehow we don't let Christ wash or serve us, we can have nothing of Christ. Remarkable. And it may be strange to your ears to hear Jesus say to Peter, yeah, you need to let me wash you. You need to let me serve you so that you will have a place with me. But it should not be surprising, and it shouldn't have been surprising that night, because this is how Jesus had been describing himself all along in the Gospels. Mark chapter 10, verse 45, the Son of Man, which is Jesus, came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Luke chapter 22, verse 27. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who is at the table? But I, Jesus, am among you as one who serves. End quote. It is here that I want to make this observation. What is going to be a crucial one in our relationship with Jesus as his followers. Oftentimes in our day and time, we are so intent on serving Christ that we forget that half of the dynamic is that we are supposed to be served by Christ. We are so intent to wash each other's feet that we forget that Christ wants to wash our feet. When was the last time you heard anybody like me talk about how Christ wants to serve you, instead of someone like me guilt-tripping you into figuring out how to make you serve Christ just a little bit more? So here then is my question to all of us. I wonder how each of us, like each individual disciple gathered in that room that night, needs Christ to serve us today. Not how you can serve him, how you need to be served by Christ, so that you are in the same zip code as Christ, so that you embrace all of Christ and are found to be a part of Christ. How do you need Jesus to serve you today? Maybe you're hopeless, and what you need from Christ is for him to break into the gloom and to offer you a sliver of light. Great! Let Christ serve you in that way. Maybe you're bored in your Christianity and you need Christ to inject you with a call, a purpose that requires faith and courage. Great, let Christ serve you in that way. For some of us, what we need to remember today most of all is that Christ's love is tireless. Christ's love will never be frustrated or lost. And no matter how big a failure you might be today or you have been this week, what you need to hear from Christ most is, I love you and I always will. Amen. How do you in your life right now need to be served by Christ? This is half of what it means to be his followers. But that's not all. Not only is the foot washing supposed to help us frame what our relationship with Christ is like, but it is also supposed to help us understand what our relationship as disciples should be. And do recall that in the first century world, foot washing is ordinary. It's simple. It's commonplace, a common courtesy. As one writer puts it, there is nothing heroic or remarkable about foot washing. So the call here is for you and I to serve one another in ways that seem ordinary. Every day, they almost slip by unnoticed. John Ortberg, in his book on the spiritual disciplines in the chapter on service, says what Jesus is describing here is the ministry of the mundane. How is it that you and I can serve one another in the small details of life, the simple conversations of life, the acts that seem so inconsequential almost everyone forgets to do them. Helping to straighten up after a church function, taking the time to tell someone thank you for the gift of their music or the class that they taught. Overhearing that someone is discouraged or down, and you go home and you just take the time to write a note of encouragement and you put it in the mail. This is what foot washing looks like in our day and time. Simple, small things. And each of us should both serve in that way and also be served in that way. Every one of Jesus' disciples should be washing other people's feet, but also having their feet washed. As a United Church of Christ pastor puts it, Christ's disciples should have wet hands and wet feet. How is it that we could leave here today realizing that from Jesus' perspective, there are no ordinary acts? There are simply what appear to be ordinary acts done by extraordinary people in the name of an extraordinary Christ, and those acts will have an extraordinary effect if we are intentional in the details of life. Leave here, cook dinner for somebody. Leave here, do the dishes without being asked. Leave here and vacuum. Leave here and pay for someone's lunch. Leave here and smile in the grocery line. Leave here and wash people's feet. This is how Trevor Hudson, in his entry last Monday, describes how we are supposed to take this surprising, poignant, powerful episode in John chapter 13. He writes, Jesus himself models service when he washes the dirty feet of his disciples. Through this act, Jesus gives the disciples, people like you and me, a pattern to follow. I do want to call your attention to this. The story of the foot washing ends with this verse. Verse 17 of John 13. And Jesus says to those gathered in the upper room, if you know these things, what things? Wash one another's feet, and let me wash your feet, so you may have a share in me. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. I wonder how our lives will be blessed because we choose to let Christ serve us and because we choose to serve one another in the ordinary, extraordinary details of life. Let's pause here at the end of the sermon for a moment to pray. Up on the screen are a few prayer prompts. I'm going to give you a moment or two in the quiet to respond to God as you heard his word taught. And then there's actually going to be a prayer after this that we're going to do together. So let's take a moment and be quiet, and then we'll pray aloud together.